talk about rethinking the final paper or talking about an essay. We couldn't quite decide what to call it because there's so many interesting ways that we could rethink the final paper. So my name is Ingrid Lundeen, and I'm faculty in the Anthropology department, and also, as Julie said, an ACERT faculty fellow this year. And so today we're going to be welcoming two speakers. One is my colleague in anthropology, Julia Zichello, and the other is Melissa Jackson from the School of Education. So Julia, or I don't know which one of you guys wants to start.
Thanks so much, Ingrid, for inviting me and for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to share my screen now. All right, I hope everyone can see the slides. So here's where the UN comes in, the slip up of the UN. So this is an UN essay assignment for the course that it's embedded in is Introduction to Human Evolution, which is a large introductory lecture course. And with that comes some challenges, of course, of doing an assignment like this, but also I think the need for this kind of assignment. So I'll explain a little bit about the course and some of the expectations of the course and why I think it is important to do something like this where you break the format away from just students doing either a final paper or something like multiple choice exams, which of course is not everyone's specialty. So, and I also have a number of different examples at the end of my presentation, which is really the fun part, examples of student submissions, poems, songs, stories, and more. There are many, many, many poems. That is the format that there is the most of, but I'll get to that. All right, so the course, Introduction to Human Evolution, there's three content areas in the course quickly: genetics and evolutionary theory, primate ecology and diversity, and fossil hominin ancestors. As it's an introductory course, it's more broad than it is deep. And also, most of the students who take this course are not science majors. And so that's, I think, also a big piece of this, of why an assignment such as this might work embedded in a course of this nature. So it's 4 credits. It also fulfills the life and physical sciences requirement. And there is in the fall semesters, there's a subset of the students who are freshmen. So sometimes 20 to 40 students are freshmen. And the course is broken down into 2 parts, lecture section and then lab. This assignment is embedded into the lecture section. The size of the lecture varies. It can be up to 175 students or down to 90 students, which is still, of course, a lot. It's an hour and 15 minutes twice a week. And then the smaller lab sections, there's 24 students, and there's lots of different assignments that are in the lab sections that are more interactive. But this was really an effort to enliven what's happening in the lecture, because other than this assignment, the lecture is made up of 3 multiple choice exams because of the size of the lecture, which we all know, can be not the most engaging for everyone involved. So we have students from all different majors. As a reflection just of the kind of Hunter breakdown of majors, we have a lot of psychology majors, and this is an estimate of 30 to 40% that are taking this class. Lots of computer scientists, English majors, fine arts, studio arts, theater, sociology, etc. There's also undeclared. I oftentimes have a lot of students come up to me like, this is my first time taking a science class, like lots of terminology I'm, not comfortable with, or I don't kind of identify as a scientist. This is like completely new to me. So again, this assignment, I think, meets them where they are as far as that perspective of maybe feeling like science isn't your strength. So what's the assignment? So it's creative on essay. It's meant to provide an opportunity for the students to present a topic from our course in a fun and creative way that can be understood by their peers. So that's really the important part, is that the product that they create at the end of this assignment is meant to be in itself a piece of science communication. So it's not just a beautiful thing at the end of the day. It's supposed to be something that could communicate to someone else some aspect of the course material, especially those people who are not involved, who have not taken the course. So one of the things that I tell students, it needs to be factually correct and potentially useful to future students. It has two components. So even though it's an unessay, there is a little bit of writing that we ask the students to do. So part one is present the information on one of the topics in the course in a new and memorable way. That's most of the, the grade from that. And I'll talk about what I mean by by a new and memorable way, or the formats. And then part two is this writing assignment, which is just a one-page explanation of what the student has done, just as a way of, understanding their intent. And yeah, so they have to have two parts. Here are some topics that I've boiled it down for some of the students, and I'll talk about how I use that in a moment. But just to give you an idea of the types of things that are within the class: structure and function of DNA, forces of evolution, primate taxonomy, primate ecology, fossil ancestors. Sometimes, when topics and assignments are too broad, that also presents a challenge for some students, even though you might go into it thinking like, it's going to be anything you want, just make it so open. But some students struggle with that, and they need a little few guidelines, which is why there's topics that are outlined here. So the format is wide open. I give them a few ideas for modes of presentation: infographic, TikTok, skits, songs, comics, videos, poems. And some people come to me with new formats that I've never heard of, like asking me whether or not that's okay. So yeah, some students are really kind of enjoying the creative aspect of this. One of the things I used to have on this list was memes that I had to delete, because I felt like there wasn't as much thought going into the memes, and also understanding the meme required seeing the original meme, and I am not up on my memes, so I didn't know. I was like, why is this funny anyway? So I took the memes out. So summary of student submissions. So I have 4 semesters of data that I've assigned this assignment. There's 397 total submissions. So thank God Blackboard is still around, because I went through all of them this week. And so there's a lot. And just to summarize, the types of things that students are doing, there's tons of poems. I'm not a poet. It is a bit challenging to grade them, but I'll talk about that in a moment. Lots of information graphics, videos, live acting skits. Some of them are really like hilarious, and just things that you would never have the opportunity to do if you were writing an essay. Voiceover slides, animations, comics, drawings, short stories, song lyrics, audio files. At the end of the presentation, I have a few audio files that I'll play, and then some really cool 3D creations. At the top there is a map that Jasper made, which was just trying to summarize where some of the hominin fossils are. So we go through the semester and we go fossil by fossil by fossil, and he's taking all of that and putting it on one map. So that was a cool submission that stood out to me. So what are some positive aspects of this assignment? Question mark, because again, I'm assuming they're positive, but open to discussion. Opportunity to boost grade for students who may not excel with multiple choice exams or scientific topics. An opportunity to showcase creativity. Obviously, we have many, theater majors, artists in the class, English majors, writers, etc. I don't think that this kind of assignment would be assigned in a biology class, but we have the opportunity to do it here in anthropology. So, and also it does to some degree promote one-on-one student-professor engagement. Sometimes the students come up to me like, oh, can I create this? What do you think of this? And I'm like, I don't know what that is, or yeah, let's try it, And so just having the opportunity to speak to students, as if you taught a huge lecture, is something that is really valuable. Also, students often express emotion around the course material. There's no outlet for that in any other format. But of course, if you're learning about primate conservation and that, primates are dying in the forest, of course there's an emotion that comes along with that, but there's no other way to express it. You can't write that in an essay. And so passion, enthusiasm, sadness. Someone wrote this really beautiful poem about the Lucy fossil once, about how they were sad that she was like objectified, that we're all just looking at her skeleton and not thinking about her as a human. So again, there's really no place for that in the course material otherwise. Also, sometimes students collaborate. Esmeralda and Anindita did this hilarious skit that's down at the bottom where Esmeralda, she interviewed Anindita as if she were someone who just came back from Madagascar studying lemurs. And then they went through all of these different aspects of what she saw in the forest. But they just had a really great chemistry. And so I allow students to collaborate, although I don't require it. So challenges, sometimes students struggle with the creative format and they're like, now I don't know what to do. Like these are my students who might excel in traditional test taking. And then they're like, this is actually not fun for me. It's the opposite. And, you know, when you have a huge class, that's always going to happen. But we do have the traditional test taking in there as well. The grading is difficult. You know, you have to, obviously you want to make sure there's the two parts that are submitted: scientific accuracy, connection to some course material. Creativity, how do you grade that? You know, we're not usually doing that kind of thing within, you know, these types of courses. And it's hard to not grade on execution. So we're not grading you on your drawing skills or your poetic structure. Like that's not, you know, what's going on here. So you have to kind of keep that in mind as well. And one of the big challenges for me is that there's lots of assignments to grade. So if there's a 175-person course at the end of the semester, even though this is maybe a great assignment, it can be a world of pain going through every single one and then really wanting to give feedback because some students put a lot of work into it. And so you have to say something about it. So that is definitely a challenge. How's the assignment changed over time? At first, it was topic wide open, format wide open. That was too wide open. So I gave them specific topics, the ones I showed you before, and then I told them no memes. I also had to specify that it has to be geared to an undergrad audience. There were a few people who were like, I did an information graphic that was for like, you know, young kids. And like, that's, you know, that's really not the level. It should be like if you were communicating with another undergrad at Hunter who hasn't taken this course. And so in the fall, I actually did make this an extra credit assignment, mostly because of the number of students that were in the class, instead of having it like, you know, within the main requirements for the course. And then as I was putting this together, I was like, should this be included as part of the lab assignments? Because the lab technically, it's 24 students and it's like a little more manageable. So I don't know, something like that. So lots of poems. I won't read all of these, but I just pulled out 3 poems so you can get an idea of the types of things that are happening. Lots of the poems rhyme. So that's something that some of these, you know, authors really took to heart. But then some of them are, you know, genuinely creative and lots of the words are accurate as far as talking about DNA and primates, etc. So here are 3 examples. Here's some art and design, primate dental adaptations over to the left, which I thought was really well done. You know, this is the kind of thing we do in the class. It's right in line with the course. And even just having, you know, drawing these can obviously reinforce to the person who's the artist what this information is. There's a comic in the center. A number of people have done these kinds of comics before. And again, there's kind of like, you know, sometimes some moodiness or emotion in these comics that is maybe not, it doesn't have a place in other formats. And then all the way over to the right, it's hard to show, but this is something that I have sitting in my class, sitting in my office. And it is meant to show the process of allopatric speciation when a mountain forms between 2 groups, you know, one population gets split into 2 and then they become different over time. And, you know, Katie put a lot of work into it. And so, you know, it's interesting visual that, you know, was very creative. And here's another one I also have in my office, which is a embroidery of mitosis, which this person started way before the deadline. And so this was pretty awesome as well. And I'm happy to have that. Lots of technology all the way over to the To the left is Punnett square generator. It should be Punnett and not Punnett, but the person, was really great at, he did all of this coding to make this like little interface where you put in the two parents, and the dominant and recessive traits, and then it tells you like the genotype of the offspring. And it's a really simple thing, but very cool, I think, to have that. In the center is Garrett, who spent lots of time working on this in Minecraft. He had a voiceover explaining all of the primates, and they were each in different scenarios. They were grouped in a way that reflected their sociality, and so the orangutan is alone at the top because they're more solitary, etc. And so that was interesting. Jaden did a video working with someone else, kind of as if someone was sending in questions like, what is DNA? What's the structure of DNA? And then he was the host who was answering these questions. Down at the bottom, Adrian asked if he could do something where there's a Japanese animation called Cells at Work, which is taking the idea of how cells work and making it into an animation, but it's not scientifically accurate. And so he did a voiceover over it to say like, hey, that part's not correct, that part's not scientifically correct. It was kind of like a Mystery Science Theater 2000 for anyone who knows what that is. So that was also hilarious. And then lastly, here are some musical examples. These are maybe my favorite. Ariana wrote a song about Neanderthals and played it on the guitar. So I'll play that first, and then lastly, I'll play the other one. So I won't play the whole thing, but just so you get an idea of how funny this is.
This is the Homo neanderthalensis song. H. neanderthalensis has amazing features similar to sapiens, but not with them either. I'll tell you all the differences. Starting with radio. They have a massive skull and brain lots of smaller gap, no ridges and big faces.
Oh, wait.
But facial prognatism too. Their brains are larger than ours is true. Oh.
Okay, so there's that. And then lastly, someone did something where so Sam took a DNA strand and translated that into notes and then played the notes. And so below he talks about how T is not an actual note, and so he replaced it with D. So there's just two. And the other thing that he did was he took the original DNA strand and he played it, and then he took the messenger RNA corresponding strand and played that, and also did for the transfer RNA strand. So these are all part of a process that we teach in the class. And so this reinforced it to him, and I thought it was really creative. And lastly, this one. Okay, great. So that's it. I have so many other examples that I had to sift through, but these are some of the ones that stood out to me. So oops, I did not want to play that again. I just wanted to go to the last slide here. All right. So thank you so much for listening. And I hope that some of this was useful in some ways, but certainly there's room for continual improvement and refinement of this type of assignment.
Wow, that was amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Julia. Melissa, do you want to share?
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I bring toys to my graduate school classroom, but now I want to bring my karaoke machine that I bought for my kid to our classroom. I'm very inspired, Julia. Thank you. That was great. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and thank you everyone for being here, for having me today. Can you see my screen? Can I get a thumbs up? Awesome. Okay, so rethinking the final paper. today I'm just going to briefly go over just an introduction of like who I am, our program, how our courses are set up. I'm going to briefly touch upon just how our program conceptualizes our non-traditional paper type of assignments for our graduate students. I'm going to share some examples, and similar to what Julia just did, talk about the strengths, the limitations, and the solutions, so that we can all think about it in terms of our own coursework moving forward. So I'm Melissa Jackson. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Special Education, specifically working in the Early Childhood Development and Learning Diverse Children and Families graduate program. So we are a graduate program preparing early childhood special education teachers. Most of our students are dual cert students, meaning that they are coming to get both early childhood certification and early childhood special education certification. Our classes, just to frame your thinking on class size as we look over some of these assignments and examples, are about 25 students per class. That can range depending on the semester. And the objective today is just for us to discuss some of those learning products from our preparation program, and illustrate some of the frameworks and lenses that we look at when structuring these assignments, structuring the grading, and thinking about them within not only single courses, but within our program as a whole. So how do we kind of think about this and create these assignments? I want to say that the work that I'm presenting today is my work as well as my fellow colleagues' work, both past and present, ECDL faculty. And it's something that we've been working on for a while, and we continue to work on every single semester, every single summer. So Julia, while you were talking about the number of submissions, I was doing some of my math of how many submissions I've gone through with some of these. I've been teaching these courses more or less for about 10 years now, a sprinkling of each. So I've got about 550 submissions. That was cool math to do. But as you were saying, Julia, like similar in our program, these assignments have been refined throughout time through identifying really what worked and what didn't work, and feedback from the students as well. So in terms of adult learning principles, we take that into account when structuring our assignments for our teachers. I had the opportunity from 2019 to 2021 to work with a higher education group called the Early Childhood Personnel Center, and they had a grant that funded a working group where we actually got to create a planning tool for both syllabi and programs as a whole within teacher preparation, to think about the different ways that we unpack knowledge in teacher preparation programs. And they look at this through different buckets of introduction of concepts, illustration, authentic learning experiences where students get to actually implement the practices that we're talking about during our sessions. Reflection, of course, that's a huge part of teaching. Guidance, so getting guidance from the professor, and feedback from the professor as well, and then having follow-up activities to support that. So a lot of the assignments that I'm going to unpack with us today are semester-long step-by-step assignments, and I'm going to do my best to explain how that goes for all of them. There's also a really cool planning matrix tool that is available widely on the internet. I can share the link with ACERT to share out, but as you can see, it takes those buckets of information, and it's a way to look at your syllabus and say, okay, I've got these 5 assignments. Am I hitting on only introduction and illustration for every single assignment? Are there ample opportunities for guidance and reflection and authentic learning? So when I'm talking about all of these practices, with our assignments, we're really looking at authentic learning, reflection, guidance, performance feedback, and follow-up activities. The introduction and the illustration comes in play during our 2.5-hour sessions that we have once a week with our students, and it comes into play with the readings that they have to do, the modules, the videos that they have to do between class. We also want to take into consideration, right? We're preparing teachers to go into the fields, right? So we also want to take into consideration just the professional development literature that looks at active learning. It looks at collaboration. It looks at practice, coaching, and support. Once again, there's feedback and reflection. And then there's duration and frequency. And I'll talk about how we build all of that into most of our assignments. Some might just have pieces of that. So what's the goal here, right? Like what is the goal of teacher preparation programs? What are the goal of some of these assignments within these courses, right? So here's like it's not a meme, but it's a saying, right? And these are shared virtually all the time, especially during Teacher Appreciation Month and Day. Teachers make more minute by minute decisions than a brain surgeon, and that's why we're going home exhausted each day, right? The goal for us in teacher preparation programs is to fill up teachers' toolboxes, and that is only one part of it. I want to fill up those toolboxes, but I want them to also know which drawer to go to in which scenario, right? And which tools to use and where to go to find resources if you don't have them. I love this toolbox image because it has just random stuff too. Because teachers are going to do more than teaching the ABCs and the one, two, threes. They are going to work with families to provide resources, to problem solve. They're going to need to help a family find somebody who can provide sensory friendly haircuts and work with a child with autism who's averse to it, right? That's different than teaching content standards and teaching assessment practices, right? So filling up their toolbox to really be able to work within the environment we're preparing them to work within. And the goal, that last image that was supposed to transition a little bit nicer, is for them to be proficient in doing this and hopefully master all of the skills that we want them to learn. But it's really important that we provide them with the guidance in a developmentally appropriate progression throughout their master's program with us. And that each step of the way that we are able to provide them with some guidance since it is such an individualized thing that we're doing. So, within the context of our assessment course, we have a number of assignments that we have done and continue to do and continue to refine throughout the years. When we think of assessment, we're typically thinking about these forms right here, right? So, checking off if a child has certain skills and if they don't, and norm referenced, right? What we're teaching in this course is assessment as a process, assessment with these tools as one piece of that picture, but integrating multiple sources through teaming and collaboration, which they will do in their jobs, right? They're going to be working with co teachers, paraprofessionals, teacher assistants, speech therapists, OT, PT, right? So we're providing opportunities for them to flex those skills in a supportive and safe environment within their graduate coursework before they go into New York City and do it themselves. So, this course is typically in their first or second semester within our graduate program. We have them videotape themselves for 5 minutes, interacting with a kiddo with no lesson plan. So, it's wide open. That's hard sometimes for some of our students because just going with the kids, interest and all of that can be like, wait, I'm supposed to be graded on lesson plans. Like, what? But we're just like, interact, just do what the kid wants to do. Then we have them use an assessment tool to score themselves. It's an opportunity for them to first tinker with an assessment tool that has you only be able to grade yourself as a 0, 1, or a 2, also to understand what it's like to be the assessor and to be the one assessed. So that kind of dips our toe into that process. We also have authentic conversations with families where they partner with families either in their schools, in their community, and they do a family interview to understand about a family, about a child, and understand their priorities and where they might want some resources. We then have the student summarize some of that information. So there is a written component, but then they also come up with resources to give something tangible to the family. In the past, we've also sought out feedback from the families, whether, the resources provided did meet, what they said in that conversation. However, we didn't get much of a response from the families. It's a lot of families to respond from. But for the most part, families have really found these assignments really, really helpful for themselves and for their kiddos. So we are talking about assessment tools within our assessment course, of course, because our students need to learn how they tick and how to open up a procedures manual and implement something. They will receive training on the job, but they will need to have some background knowledge in just how these assessments are, created and how they're implemented. So, what we do is we have them do an assessment tool critique. We also have them do a semester long child assessment where they work with a family and a child, and they do a comprehensive assessment project that starts with an initial family conversation. It involves multiple interviews and observations throughout the 15 weeks that we're together. And then it ends with a final report, a report snapshot that I'll illustrate in a second, and a workshop for the peers in the classroom so that we can all unpack the challenges as well as the things that we're great at within the assessment process, and also just share information with each other. So these are some examples that I have up on the screen of a workshop that the students present at the end of the semester. So typically the last two classes, I hand over the class to them to teach each other and unpack some of that. So they talk about strengths, they talk about areas to grow, they show video samples and have their fellow classmates be able to unpack that with them and also collaborate. So they engage in teaming and collaboration about that. They talk about lessons learned, etc. And they engage their classmates in like a workshop type of activity. So one of our groups once did a Minecraft activity as well, which was actually like more physical things that we did, and it was really really cool to see, to just engage their classmates in this content. We give tangible items to the families that work with us. So we provide them with a report of what we saw, and we also give them a snapshot and have a conversation that gives them recommendations for whatever it is that they're wanting to work on with their child. And this is the example of that assessment tool critique in a workshop. This has been refined throughout the years, but as we have it now, I actually group students in groups of like 3, and they are each assigned. So we have about 6 groups, a different assessment tool. And what they do is they become experts of that tool and they teach their classmates about it. They teach their classmates how to implement it. So this way, we're not spending the entire semester just learning tools as designed. We're learning them as one piece, but they are getting exposure to all of the different tools and how to use them. In our curriculum planning course, we look at different strategies. We look at inclusive practices. And it would be one thing for the students to unpack those strategies and tell me why they work, right? But I want to know how you're going to use those strategies that we're talking about in your teaching practice. So we have them throughout the semester do a planning matrix across the home and community as well as school. So they observe a preschooler with an IEP or an IFSP within an inclusive setting. And they take that observation and they use that to plan throughout the year, throughout the semester. So one thing I want to mention about both of these courses is typically for each of these semester long projects, there is something due every 3 weeks, and there's explicit feedback given every 3 weeks that has the assignment build upon itself. So there's opportunities for editing and refining with feedback, which is very similar to how they'll edit goals and reports within the school system. We're not just gonna say, okay, here are your IEP goals, this feedback needs to be integrated, but that's it, right? Like we are gonna work towards mastery to proficiency within those documents. So we're providing that opportunity within their teacher prep program to learn how to accept and apply feedback as well. And also to push back on feedback and ask questions about that feedback and engage in self-advocacy. I'm gonna just scroll through what this looks like. Can you guys see the little assignment that I've got on there? So part 1 of this assignment, which is typically due in week 6 of the semester, is they observe a kid They create goals that are observable and measurable, aka SMART goals. And they provide a little rationale as to why they're going to target these goals for the kiddo based on their assessment. And they tie in the New York standards. They get feedback from me. Then they think about those skills that they're going to teach and they figure out how to embed it in ongoing activities. I have them select 4 of them. They plan what that's going to look like. Once again, they have an opportunity to apply feedback from the first submission with this submission. Then they get more feedback. And then a couple weeks later, we actually go into planning for each activity, identifying for each skill specific adaptations, modifications, intentional teaching, and explicit child-directed strategies. So they're not telling me what these strategies are. They're not saying I'm going to implement time delay, which is a strategy where you wait a predetermined number of seconds. I want to know what that's going to look like for Johnny in morning meeting, in snack, in gym class, and at arrival and dismissal. So this is them being able to show all of that theory and all of that literature that we're giving them in the seminar and through the readings and how they would apply that within a classroom context. And then once again, getting that feedback from the professor. I always tell them, especially with this project, I'm like, expect a lot of comments, but it's for us to work through and unpack. So they go through all of that. Another component of planning, of course, is data collection. So they also practice creating their own data collection form within this assignment as well. So yes, it is writing, but it's a different planning matrix tool that they use. So they've got their focus activity and etc. We're also looking at planning for the home and the community. However, we're not able to observe everything and anything and everything within 15 weeks. So we provide virtual opportunities for them to see different children and families engaging in early intervention sessions. And they then take the framework of best practices within early intervention and they critique those home visits. They also practice within that creating what's called a home visit note, which is something that if they were going to work in early intervention, they would have to produce every single session that they visited a child or a family. So we have them go through multiple virtual experiences where they'll watch a video of a child and then they'll provide ratings on a critique and for different standards of best practices. Then towards the end, sorry if I'm making you nauseous, they reflect a little bit and then they create a home visit plan and a home visit note that I'll illustrate with my next transition. So this is a sample of how they would watch a video of a child and a family and they would summarize what happened during the visit and also plan for the next session, which is what they would do in the field. Once again, this is an example of a data collection sheet that they might play with and create for this assignment. Another kind of low stakes way of practicing these skills before they're going into the classroom and doing it themselves. Just some really quick other examples from other ECDL courses. This is one of my favorites is in our autism class, we have the students create a PSA, a public service announcement video about autism, because they, in their practice, may come into contact with questions or misconceptions about what autism is. So we have them do some research and they create these wonderful videos. I'm going to share just a few seconds of it. You guys can see it loading.
Intervention is likely to be more effective when it is provided earlier in life rather than later.
Early intervention is a system of services and supports that help babies and toddlers from birth to 3 with developmental delays or disabilities and their families in the.
So I wish I could play the whole thing, and we have so many samples of students interviewing people, but really great PSAs that they've created. We also have them videotape themselves implementing interventions and getting feedback based on that. We also run an infant toddler play group. So one Sunday a month, actually, we have them as part of their the only assignment that they have in one of our courses is to attend this play group and eventually run it. So they work on planning and running a play group with kiddos and families with disabilities. We have permanent products of visual supports that they create that is refined throughout the semester. We have them create resources and media outreach products, grants, workshops, conference presentations, proposals. We have opened it up a little bit more to give more choice within that so that they can pick what they're interested in. And then we've also done some word cloud assignments from the first class to the last class, and attached reflection to that. In my own class, we do some drawing of that about what assessment is. And typically in the first class, you see a kid and a teacher at a desk. And in the last class, they draw about families and systems working together. So it's really cool to see that growth in a really creative way. So what are some strengths of these types of projects? It's authentic learning, it's engagement and embodied learning. They are talking to families, they are working with kiddos, working with families. They're engaging in collaboration and communication outside of their job, right? They're engaging in critical thinking, they're reflecting, and we're really trying to bridge theory and practice in hopes that they'll carry that forward after the time that they leave Hunter. Limitation is there are time constraints. We only have 15 weeks. So what happens if a family that is working with us suddenly in the middle of the semester is like, I can't anymore, right? Something's happened or we've moved. We work with it, we pivot, we use resources. There are resource limitations. We're lucky to have partnerships with our adjuncts, with different schools through our own connections to be able to recruit families and children. But that is definitely a limitation some semesters. It was especially hard with these assignments post-COVID, where families didn't want anyone in their homes or communities. We were able to flex and have some remote aspects of it to meet those preferences. And I have to say, and you were talking, Julia, about 175 students in your lectures. I can't even imagine if that was our class size. So the grading workload is a lot for the professor, I have to say. So some solutions to that, though, is having structured guidelines. I do have rubrics for all of these assignments. And within the rubrics, I give point by point feedback, not like 0.5 points came off for this, but I really give a lot of feedback because that's what I would do if I were working with a teacher and a kiddo in the field. So it's just no different than what we would do in the field. So we give structured and detailed feedback and assessment to them. We do a gradual release, a gradual implementation. So as I mentioned, these projects build upon each other, and I'm with them every step of the way, but it does create a lot of grading. And then I think for some students, they're coming to us with different capacities, with leveraging technology, leveraging different resources, and even partnerships. So that is something to work through and work with each other. We work with a lot of faculty across our department to provide resources. And I think just a major solution is to refine, and get feedback from fellow professors, your adjuncts, yourself, and your students on all of this. And that is it. I know we just unpacked.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was great. And yeah,